Alright, so we're going to do out a sketch here. So if we're doing something, I'm picking an example of a bat box because I don't think anyone in the class is actually doing a bat box for the design. You'd normally start off with a picture. This is a picture I got on the internet of the bat box that I'd like to design. I want to sketch that out in isometric view. Similar to what you see there, that's roughly an isometric view. You're looking for a photo that has vertical lines, lines going to the right, lines going to the left. So I'm going to come along and start to sketch that out. So to set up the basic sketch, I'm going to come along, I'll start with a roughly vertical line. So I don't have to get it exactly vertical. I don't have to use a board and T-square for this. I'm going to go roughly vertical. I'm going to come back at roughly 30 degrees. So about 30 degrees is going back there to the left. And I turn it over and about 30 degrees to the right. So I said this doesn't need to be exact. And that is my isometric axis. I'm going to sit this into a box. I'm looking at it, the box, if I look at it, and it's handy sometimes to measure the sketch. It's about 80 millimeters high, about 20 millimeters deep, and about 30 millimeters wide. So in other words, when I'm looking at it, it's about a quarter deep as it is high. So when I'm coming along and getting my proportions, I could even use those measurements to make it 80 millimeters. It's just that that's a little bit small. So in other words, I'll come along and I'll take this as a height. So I'm going to say that's a decent height. I'll take that height. I'm going to go again. I could use two set squares. If you do tech graphics, you could come along and use your two set squares to draw your parallel lines. But I'm just going to do it freehand. So I'm going to take my line and I'm going to shoot up here and I'm going to take off a line that looks pretty parallel. That's not bad. Same at the top. I'm going to go the other direction. I'm going to take one over here that looks like it's pretty parallel. And that's not bad either. Now, this I've drawn is about 100 high. I'm going to make it about 25 deep because that's a quarter of it. So in other words, if this is the full height, I want to make it about a quarter of the depth. So I'll come along then and I'll take my vertical line, so for the back. So here is the depth of it roughly. I'll go up here. So that's giving me the side and I'll come back at my 30 degree angle. The width of it, I said it's about 80 and 30, so it's roughly a third of the height. So roughly a third of 100 is about 33, 34. That looks a little bit narrow, so I'll come back maybe about 40. And what I'm trying to do is get the proportions of it right. So I'm talking about measurements here. The reason I'm going on with these measurements, and I'll take my line back, is the proportion. So what I mean by that, in relation to the height versus the width, or the height versus the depth from back to front, I want to get them about right. That proportion to me looks pretty okay. I'm going to start off by drawing in the roof. The roof section is down at an angle. I'm going to just take a slant, so from my top corner here, I'm going to come down at just a slant for the roof. Here's my slant for the roof, and I'll come down parallel to that. I'm going to take my lines back, again parallel to these two. So even if you've got angles, I'm still basing it around the box. There. And I'm going to come back up to hit the corner. See, this line hits the corner, I'll come back up to the corner. Or I could have gone with my parallel, but I know that this needs to join back up to the top corner. So there is the roof drawn in. And I'll darken that in because I can see it now. That's my roof drawn. The side of the box. So I've got a side here, and I'm going to show the thickness to show that that's made out of timber. So I've got my side kind of already here. It's drawn in. But I don't have any thickness on it. So in other words, thickness means it's not made out of cardboard or paper. So when I draw it in, I'm going to put a thickness onto it. So I'm going to give it a width here. So that's the piece of timber on the side. I'm going to show the other side with a little bit of width as well. So you have to show thickness to material. Otherwise, it looks like it's made out of a piece of paper, as I said. So there's the other side. I see in the line it comes back here a little bit, and I'll draw that in just so I can see it lightly. Line comes back in here, and I've got my two sides. So that's roughly it. I've got a couple of lats coming across here, a couple of boards coming across, but I see they jump in here. There's a gap in here, so I'm going to draw that in. So what I'm going to do is come in here a little bit. So back in, and this is all going to be with construction lines, and that's going to give me my gap. And now I'll come along and I'll put in a couple of boards. So I'll put in one board here and a second board. and up. So now I've got my little gap put back in. The bottom corner here, I'm going to come across from my other side. So what I'm forming is the bottom of the box. And from this point I can go up the way. And that is a rough sketch done out. I'll darken it in and I'm going to go over it freehand. At this stage I've got my 2B pencil, so what I'm going to do is make a freehand sketch out of it by coming over the pieces freehand. I'm going to take my time with this because I have a lovely sketch to begin with. I don't want to wreck it by doing this very roughly. You get the idea? I'll darken that in now. Now to bring the sketch to life a bit, there was kind of rails on the roof. So I'll put in some of those rails now. So I'll just lightly draw them in and then I'll go back over them with the dark pencil. So roughly there. So there's my rails put in. And that might mean this was made out of a few pieces of timber, so I'm going to show joints coming down here. So the idea is to get thickness into it. Now, I want to give it a bit of life. What I mean by that is I'm going to put a bit of grain on this. So I'll draw grain on kind of with V's, getting larger and larger and wider. There's a few V's. Again, I'll put a couple of V's over here. Couple of V's over here, and that's showing grain pattern. End grain, you show just a couple of little lines to show end grain. So kind of curved lines. There's a little bit of end grain. Likewise in here, I'll have a couple of V's, and I darken those in slightly with a bit of brown. So they're kind of darker when I put those in. Same thing, go back over them with the brown. I can do this kind of roughly, they shouldn't be too perfect looking. And that is a little bit of grain on it. Then I can go over it very, very lightly with my brown, or I can take something like a little bit of yellow and very lightly shade it in. So very, very light. I'm not trying to colour this thing in with a crayon, I'm just very, very lightly going over. So I'm giving it a tinge of colour. So you can see I'm not even trying to get to the edges, it's just to give it a little bit of detail. Top of it then might have been made out of slates or something like that, so you might have a little bit of blue, but again very, very light. We don't colour things in, it's just tiny little bits of colour. And just on the end I put a little bit of blue. That is a decent sketch done. I have to put labels on now. So last part then is a few of my labels to explain it. So I've got my slanted roof, screw and glue joint here, and this is the entrance where the bats come up. Okay, so give your own design a go. So whether you're making a bird house or a bird feeder, or you're making a bug hotel or anything like that, give a go at sketching it out.